There we go. Okay. How is everybody on this Valentine's Day?
Good.
Good.
Right.
Good. It's nice to meet you, Ginger, finally.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're up to 14. All right. Since I am recording, I am going to go ahead and get started because we can, I can share it with the people at the beginning. Let's find my, in all my panic, make sure I've got my, can everybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
That says an ecology of spring wildflowers at the South Carolina Botanical Garden?
No.
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 See you.
I can't see me. Okay. Why? Share screen. All right.
There we go.
All right.
Really? Okay, so I'm going to make it big. Okay, people coming in the waiting room. Oh my gosh. Talk about a mess. Okay, hold on. Slideshow, play from start. Can you see it full screen?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
This is happy.
All right.
This is supposed to be because he lays on the bed. You just have to lay here.
Hold on. Where do I get it? Okay. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing because these people are in the waiting room and I can't do both at once because, y'all. All right, let's let these people in. Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, ma'am.
Still?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. If I can admit people, I'm going to take a look around real quick to see if I can.
Hi, Sue. I'm finally on.
Hey,
I think.
well, I can hear you if that helps.
Okay, great.
Sue, can you hear me? This is Harry Haslam. I just joined.
Hey, Harry, I can hear you. We're up to 17 people, so we're almost, I'm going to just keep letting people in and I'm going to record everything. And so, and actually this is being recorded. If you run out of time, because this is going later than I anticipated, there will be a recording available for you. And I'm sorry for all of this confusion. I don't know. It's just me.
No, so.
It's all of us.
So we're almost there. We've got 17 people and we had about 22. So we'll give it a few more minutes. And actually, I'm going to tuck that to the side. Can you still see the screen where it says an ecology of spring wildflower? Okay, then I
Yes.
think I can multitask with these people. So I'm gonna get started. I'm gonna hide all of you. I'm gonna take a really deep breath. And I am going to welcome you to my presentation on an ecology of spring wildflowers. If you would mute yourselves, that would be wonderful. If you have questions, please put them in the chat and I'll get to them at the end, or I'll answer them via email, depending on how things go. If I don't make things clear, please feel free to yell at me and say, wait a minute, back up. But don't do it all at once because that'll scare me. So welcome to this talk, An Ecology of Spring Wildflowers. My name is Sue Watts, and I'm an educator here at the South Carolina Botanical Garden, if you don't know me, and I do know a good few of you. I love spring wildflowers, and I was out in the botanical garden yesterday with a group, and they are just slowly starting to come up. I saw some trillium that were in flower. There were some windflowers. The mayapple are just beginning to pop up, and it's a really exciting time from now until we get to this, which is really late April, early May, when you've got all the trillium, you've got the phlox, you've got ragweed, you've got celandine poppies. So we're going to talk about most of the pictures that I have are from our plants in our garden. And I want to tell you a little bit about our garden if you don't know about it already. And then we're going to talk about the ecology of spring wildflowers. Okay. Okay, so in our garden, we have a trail called the Natural Heritage Trail. And this is the signage, and this is a map of our botanical garden. And this garden started roughly around 10 years ago. It was started by our former director, Patrick McMillan, who you might know from his television show, Expeditions with Patrick McMillan. And he had a bit of a problem. The garden was not doing so great. And we had put in the late 1990s, our visitor center over here on the very far right-hand side of our garden. But most of the people came here to the duck pond, and most of our visitors were here. So he wanted to join this area over here with this area over here. And he put in this trail that runs through the backbone of the garden. And it goes through all the habitats of South Carolina, from the maritime forest at the far right, through a longleaf pine savanna, through a prairie, and into the woods. And we are going to be up here in this J, which is our cove forest habitats. All of this you can do if you walked at a fairly steady pace in 30 minutes. It is a phenomenal resource. It's unique, I think, in that it goes through very large habitats. You can actually feel that you're there. So we're going to concentrate on J today, spring wildflowers. All right. So my impetus, my inspiration for this program was this ostensibly a children's book. It's called Wake Up Woods. It's about 20 pages or so. It's put out by the Indiana Native Plant Society, and it was published in 2019. And I found this book and I immediately fell in love with it. And as you can see from the cover, it's absolutely beautiful. These illustrations by Jillian Harris, every page opens up to a 2-page spread about 1 or 2 spring wildflowers. And it's roughly chronological as they would open in the springtime. And on those pages are a text that explains a little bit about the plant, but also the illustrations are showing you the interactions between animals and flowers. In this case, you can see the mouse, the bees, the caterpillar. It's supposed to be a children's book. It is a really deep book. I highly recommend it. So this is where I started, 2019, and then COVID hit. And so I didn't have a whole lot of things to do. So I used this book as a jumping off point.
No, you're fine.
Am I doing okay?
I don't realize you're. I was just.
You're okay? Somebody's not muted. Okay, so this was my impetus. And then I found this wonderful book on the left by Carol Gracie. She was an educator at the New York Botanical Garden. And this is about an inch thick. This is a book about spring wildflowers of the Northeast. But of course, we have the same sorts of flowers here. It is a wonderful book. I highly recommend it. And I threw up the summer wildflowers just so you know it exists. I used it quite extensively. This one in particular. Okay, so these were my impetus to this program. And during COVID, I put it together and I've done it a couple of times. Okay, so the topic is spring wildflowers and ecology. So what do I mean by ecology? When we have children's programs here, we start very, very basic and we talk about living and non-living things. And then as the kids get older, we put the fancy labels on biotic and abiotic. Abiotic is non-living things, and you can see some of them here. And it's in the interaction between an organism and abiotic factors. These are just some of them. There are many more. And also biotic factors, living things. If this talk covered all of these things and the relationship between spring wildflowers, we'd be here for 2 or 3 days and we're already behind, so we won't do that. But we are going to look at the interaction between plants and the weather and plants and animals. So that's what we're going to talk about today, or at least I'm going to talk about. So geographically, we are looking at the Southern Appalachians, and you can see, or Appalachians, depending, you can see that it just nicks South Carolina. And so the plants that we're going to talk about, the flowers we're talking about, are in these kinds of habitats. They're in rich cove forests, which is really a bowl-shaped depression within the mountains. Kind of looks like this. This is a terrible picture, but it's the best I could find. So it's sheltered. It's usually moist. It usually has a rich soil, often because of amphibolite, a rock we have up in these mountains that breaks down and puts more magnesium and some calcium in the soil. So it's sheltered, it's moist, but it's also a deciduous woodland. So these plants are very specific to this habitat because they take advantage of that time when the leaves are off the trees. So this is where we're talking geographically. And the species diversity in this area is phenomenal. Over 70 species in these habitats. Places like you'll see them in, let's see, I've got a list so I didn't forget. In South Carolina, you will see them at Jones Gap State Park, Table Rock State Park, and Oconee State Park and Caesar's Head. One of my favorite walks to do in this area is to go to Oconee Station Falls and walk up to the waterfall and see these habitats. There's beautiful displays of wildflowers. So if you have a chance to go, you should do that. All right, so weather, I think people are calling in because they can't get on. Oh, well, okay. So weather are some of the adaptations we're going to talk about of these plants, these spring wildflowers to the weather. And then we're also, in the second part, we're going to look at spring wildflowers and their relationship to pollinators, and then seed dispersers, and then people, very happy people in this little graphic. Okay, so these are some of the flowers that we will start seeing alongside our Natural Heritage Trail. I'll talk about some of these, but not all of them. And I haven't labeled these. You're probably very familiar with them, but I took these pictures over the past few years. So, and I produced a little flyer that I can send to you if you're interested. And it has these plants in order, plus some of the ecology I'm discussing today. So these are the flowers. And here are some of the weather adaptations. And the issue for these plants is that the weather in the mountains and even into the Piedmont where we are can be very cloudy, very rainy, and very cold. And so if you're a flower, that causes you some, or a plant, that causes you some problems. Even here where I live, as late as April, we can have snow. This is my little dog, Monty, who's no longer with us, enjoying the snow that we had. So weather adaptations are of critical importance to survival. And these are really tough plants, even though they're tiny. Like I said, they pop up when they take advantage of the leaf cover being gone. And this is kind of what it looks like right now where I am. One of the strategies that they employ is to be geophytes. This was a new word to me, geo meaning ground, phyte, I'm not sure. And they have structures underneath the ground that they rely upon. So these are actually perennials. They come back every year, but it takes them a while to grow from seed to some of these underground structures. For example, for trout lily over here, it'll take 7 years for them to develop enough of a starch food down here to be able to produce a flower. So it takes a long time for these plants to be established. This is trout lily. I noticed yesterday on the trail that we have them emerging, and I'm beginning to see people put up pictures of them. This is spring beauty. It's also up at the moment. I haven't seen too many of them, but it is up and it's in the woodlands. And then bloodroot. I love bloodroot, and I don't know why. I just really have an affinity for this plant, and it is not up yet, but I go every other day and try and check for it. So a lot of these plants have these underground structures, and those are really interesting in the way that they work with the trees and the leaves being off the trees. So I found this diagram, and you can see after flowering, it becomes dormant through the summer. So all the green and all the flower parts disappear back, and they're dormant. Then in the autumn, they start maturing their flower and developing the shoot further. So when the leaves are off the trees, they're actually growing underground, excuse me. And then in winter, they're dormant, and then above ground growth happens in the spring, and then bulb enlargement. These bulbs, I think it was trout lily I saw, can grow up to 450% bigger as they photosynthesize. So this is how they use the time with the leaves off the trees. Okay, so that. You will notice a lot of these plants are very, very small. These early flowering plants are tiny. They're nestled down in the leaf litter, getting protection from the leaves. These are 3 of the early flowering ones. They're all less than 6 to 12 inches. They're very, very tiny. Hepatica, bloodroot, and trout lily. This is not something I've seen scientifically, but just by empirical observation. As the year or the season goes through, the plants get taller. And by April, most of the spring wildflowers that are just emerging are coming out. They're at a foot and a half, 2 feet tall. Some of these include columbine, the phlox, and the wood poppy. And then you've got your Virginia bluebells, which we don't see too often here, but we do have in the garden. So they're getting taller over the season. And I think that they're not having that protection from the leaf litter. They don't need it quite so much. Okay, So another adaptation, hairy stems and protective leaves. This is a very tiny little hepatica leaf that I've been monitoring for a while. It's in our garden on a piece of limestone. And just look at those hairs. Those hairs are making a quilt. Really, they acting like a quilt to keep air and keep the leaf protected. This is a particularly good shot because it shows you how much hair there is there. Then bloodroot actually comes up with its own little blanket. And so when it gets warmer, that leaf will unfurl and the protection will not be needed anymore. Similarly, I just noticed yesterday, the mayapple kind of comes up like that. It comes up like an umbrella, and then it unfurls and protects the flower. So if you have cloudy days, or if you have wet days, or if you have cold days, the chances of a pollinator flying are minimized. Pollinators need a specific temperature to fly. For most of them, it's over 50 degrees. For some of them, it can be just over 40 degrees, but those are quite warm temperatures. So if you're not going to get pollinated by an insect, you've got to have a secondary string to your bow. And one of the strategies is for if after a few days a plant doesn't get pollinated, it self-pollinates, autogamy. And this actually happens in bloodroot and hepatica. These stamen, after 3 days, will bend and touch the stigma. And so without pollinators, they've been able to pollinate themselves, which is a wonderful thing to happen if it's not really the best day in the world. So that's one strategy. A second strategy, and I'm going to try and pronounce this, is cleistogamy. I'm not really sure. Violas exhibit this. They have two kinds of flowers. They have the traditional flower that we see, and that's pollinated by insects. We have also these little tiny flowers that are actually at the soil line and under the soil, and they self-pollinate. I got interested in viola last year when I was researching because I've never planted a viola in my garden, and my garden is covered with them. And this is partially why I think, because they are so proficient at self-pollinating. The third and final way that I have put in this talk, and there may be others, is the ability to spread either underground or overground by other kinds of means. So either runners or stolons. I noticed last year our mayapple, which is here at the bottom, has suddenly spread phenomenally through the garden. Where there were one or two, there are now 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So these have been really happy and spreading. And so that's one good way you can get new growth, new colonies. The other thing I had learned recently is about the trout lily, that it takes, like I said, 7 years to establish a flower. Some of the colonies that we see in the woodlands where they've been undisturbed can be 100 to 200, 300 even years old. So where you see a big colony of something, it's been there for a long time. So I'm going to pause here and ask if anyone has any questions, because this is a natural break between what I'm going to talk about next. So does anyone have any questions? Am I going too fast? Are you still there?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank goodness. I was beginning to think
Yes,
you all
ma'am.
had gone away.
No,
It's
I'm
like,
enjoying
"I
it."
see you.
speed is just fine, I think.
Okay, good. I'm so sorry. I put you all guys away from the visual, so I couldn't see you.
Is there a way we can get rid of seeing people across the top? Because I just saw something that was fairly disturbing to me.
Okay.
Is there any way to,
Okay.
and it's okay if not, I just,
All right. So,
don't worry too much about it. It'll be okay. Hopefully people will understand that they could be possibly seen.
okay.
Yeah, people need, you can turn off your camera on your thing. If you press the camera button, you can turn off your camera so that people can't see you. But I don't know how you can turn off other people's cameras.
Okay. And I actually, I have all the people and at the top bar, there's a series of little blocks and the far left one says hide thumbnail visitor video, and that moved everyone away. Okay, y'all. This is what happened. The first time I started this, it was in Clemson's and we have free unlimited time. The second, when we finally got this working, it was with my private account and we're going to run out of time in 8 minutes. This is just so frustrating. So what I'm going to do is set up another meeting for the second half, send you another link, and hopefully we'll get through that. So let me send you all a link. It'll take me a few minutes and then we'll answer questions and then we'll go from there. So I'm going to stop this meeting and then I'm going to send you another link. I cannot apologize enough, but I don't know what else to do. So.